Welcome to the Demeere podcast. We talk about martial arts, self-defense, and a whole lot more. And now your host, Demeere.
Hi everybody, and welcome to episode 9 of the podcast, where we talk about self-defense, martial arts, and a whole bunch more. Now, I'm going to start this episode here with a little bit of an update, just giving you some information about what's going on. And if you've been following my podcast, you know what that's going to be about. And I also have a new video that I want to talk about, and we'll end up with a little bit of a Q&A. I got an interesting question that I wanted to cover. So all that said, let's get started with the updates, because there's a bunch of them. The first one first. So I had my surgery a few days ago, so on Wednesday, and it's Friday when I'm recording this. For those who don't know, my shoulder was injured this summer and I needed surgery. There was a ruptured rotator cuff muscle that needed to be reattached, and that's what the doctor did. And there was also a tear in the labrum. Now, the labrum is a sort of capsule that protects your shoulder. I'm oversimplifying, obviously, but that makes the most sense. The surgery went really well. The doctor did have to put in 2 anchors, which is basically 2 pins, into the bone to reattach the tendon. And he basically said that, well, normally when we grab a tendon to reattach it, it's just you pull and it's fine. And he said your tendons pulled back, so they're quite strong. And so I'm like, okay, the training wasn't for nothing. But that meant that he had to use 2 anchors, so that made it a little bit more painful for me when the final sedatives that they gave me wore off, which is where I am now. The surgery went well. I'm not supposed to use my arm for anything really for the next 4 weeks, and I'm going to be a good boy and do exactly that, which is listen to the doctor. That's what I always advise all my clients when I teach them personal training, and in all the sessions that I give my clients. It's the same thing. If you've got a problem, listen to the doctor first, do what he says, and then make sure you heal correctly. So I'm going to be a good boy, and I am not going to do anything strenuous for the next 4 weeks. Then I have my appointment with the doctor again. He's going to check everything out. And normally, if all goes well, then I will start my rehab therapy. That's what's been going on now. All in all, I can't really complain. The surgery went as well as could be expected, and the first night was fine. What they do is they give you a nerve block, which is an interesting experience in and of itself, because the doctor before the surgery basically stuck a needle into my neck, and then they poked around until they found the right nerve, the one that makes my right arm function. And you notice right away when they find it, because your arm starts spasming like crazy. So and I said, yeah, no, that's fine, it's normal. They didn't warn me, so that was without warning. Seeing your arm spasm up like that, it's a kind of freaky thing, but it was all fine. And then they numb the nerve, and basically they block it from working for, let's say, a period of about 24 hours, which meant that then they put you under for the surgery, obviously, but the main anesthetic is that nerve block. And when you wake up, you hardly feel anything. You can't move that arm, so it's fine. The worst part is over. Obviously, when the nerve block is fully gone, that's when you start feeling the pain. It wasn't as bad as it could have been, but it was quite significant in the sense that, so they had to put in 2 anchors, 2 metal anchors into the bone, but they also had to scrape off a part of my shoulder blade, which is the acromion, which is the edge of the shoulder blade, and because the muscle they had to reattach partly goes in this small opening, that part of my shoulder blade was actually getting in the way. Turns out I have a sharpened shoulder blade point at that edge, so that was causing a lot of the problems. But anyway, that should be fixed now, so I'm looking forward to getting back to a full recovery, which should take first 4 weeks of immobility, then start with rehab, and rehab should take about 8 weeks in total. So 4 more weeks, so we're at 8 weeks in total since the surgery, to basically resume normal life. Now, normal life obviously does not mean punching and kicking stuff, but that means that I can drive a car again, which means that I can work again. and that is the biggest hindrance for me. As those of you who listen to episode number 7, if I'm not mistaken, where I explained that I was thinking of doing a crowdfunding in the meantime, because I'll basically be unemployed for 2 months. And being self-employed, that means that there's no income. So I tried to set that up, but in short, I didn't have enough time to do it correctly. I have zero experience setting up a crowdfunding, and I looked into many articles to see how you do that properly. And I found that to do that correctly, it does take some preparation. It does take some time to do it right. I simply didn't have the time to do that, so I decided against it. The main reason I didn't have time is that I didn't expect my surgery to be that quickly, because the surgeon I went to is actually quite popular. So he was unlikely to be able to squeeze me in before the holiday season. So I was expecting at best mid-January 2018 to get my surgery, and actually it was a month early. So that meant that everything that I had already planned for workshops and other professional commitments that I'd taken on had to be squeezed into 1 month. So that's been main thing that I've been very busy working with. And that's why the crowdfunding didn't go through. So on the other hand, I focused on something else, 2 things. So first of all, trying to finish the Boxing for Self-Defense book. That's I wouldn't say fully done, but one of the key things I had to absolutely do first before I went to surgery was do the photo shoot. And if you followed me a little bit on my Facebook page, and my supporters on Patreon have seen several of the pictures that I took during the photo shoot, and I think it turned out pretty good. I'm actually quite happy with the result. We had a good setup. One of my students lent me his excellent his excellent camera, and I had some good lighting and everything. So and my student who was modeling for me with me in the pictures, he did a really good job. So I think it's gonna come out quite well in the end. So that's done, and obviously the reason why that was so critical, well, if I'm not going to be able to lift my arm for at the very least the first 4 weeks, there's no way I can do a photo shoot. So it needed to be done before the surgery, and that was last Sunday. So I'm very happy that that's done, and then now I'm going to keep on working on finishing the manuscript, and then try to get it published as quickly as possible. That's the first thing that I wanted to do. But something else that I wanted to do, obviously, was make sure that I can give another product published as quickly as possible to have some additional income. And I'm very glad to say that I managed to do just that. And that's a new instructional video that I put online, and it's called 5-Element Arm. Now, that is a little bit of a strange title if you're not used to the particular brand of Tai Chi Chuan that I teach, which is a very practical self-defense system. Unlike many of the traditional systems in Chinese martial arts that you see, there's a reason why the nickname is called Practical Tai Chi Chuan. Well, it needs to work. And one of the reasons why I like this system so much is because that focus on the practical side is always there. And 5-Element Arm is one of the drills in which this is clearly seen. And I'll just quickly give you the explanation. The whole point of 5-Element Arm is it's kind of like a failure drill when you do firearms training. What if your weapon malfunctions? You can't just pretend it didn't happen. You can't throw your firearm at the enemy. You have to clear the weapon and then put it back in battery and resume firing, or do something else, whatever your procedures are. But it's a failure drill. Something goes wrong and you have to fix it. You have to know what to do. This is the mindset of the 5-Element Arm drill. The whole idea behind it is that you lost the use of one arm for whatever reason. Like in my case, I'm not going to be able to use my arm for at least 7 to 8 weeks to defend myself. So what do I have to do in the meantime? I mean, it's not acceptable that I can't defend myself in the meantime. I have one good arm left, so how does that change from going from using two arms, to only having one arm to do a technique? And that's what the drill teaches. It could be something else. You could be defending yourself and you get injured. The guy, I don't know, he hits you with a weapon, or he slashes you across the arm, and you lose the function of that arm either in part or totally, and you have to rely on the other arm. What do? Or the example that I like to use a lot is that you're actually protecting somebody. And one of the ways that you can do that is keep that person behind you, and you maintain contact with them with one arm, so you know where they are and you can guide them. And then you have to use the other arm to defend yourself. So, and there could be many different reasons why you do this, but that is the purpose of the 5-element arm drill. It teaches you to defend against 5 very common attacks that cover different lines of attack, and how you can then flow into the defense using one arm and then into the offense. And that's the whole setup. Now, the video that I made is about 30 minutes long, and as far as I know, it's the only video, instructional video, that is available on the market that focuses on that drill. And I pretty much only scratched the surface of it, of that concept. There's a lot more that I do for my own training in that regard, and that I think once I'm fully healed up, that I might make some additional videos in that line of thought, so that you know what to do, how to practice if something goes wrong. It's, in my opinion, one of the hallmarks of the more serious and practical training. If you don't just focus on, well, this is what I want to happen, this is how I want to defend myself against this guy, but also, what if something goes wrong? You need to have a backup plan. You need to have plan A, B, C, D, and so on. And you need to develop procedures for that. And that is what this drill does. Now, it is a traditional drill because it comes from a traditional Chinese martial art. However, I, as always, try to make it as practical as I can, in the sense that I have my own way of doing this drill, adding a few smaller elements that other teachers might not. But that's a personal preference, and I hope you enjoy that kind of thing when you see the video. There's a preview you can watch, and I'll put the link in the show notes where you can get the video. It's $3.99, so it's not expensive at all, and it's available online or for download. And I hope you guys like it. So if you want to support the podcast and me during my disabled period that I'm going through now for the next 2 months, I would very much appreciate it. And you can also support in other ways by just sharing a link with people who might be interested. So that is the first thing that I wanted to mention. That these are all the updates. So I survived my surgery, and the next instructional video is pretty much out there. I just put up a blog post explaining all the details, and I'll link to that as well in the show notes. And then the Boxing for Self-Defense book. Again, I don't know exactly when it will be released, because a lot of it depends on how well I can function now. Just to give you an idea, last night I think I slept about 3 to 4 hours. So I woke up with my head basically, my brains were swimming around in my skull, and not much coherent thought was possible. But then, time goes by, and I take the painkillers, and it gets better. And it all depends on how well I can function and do some decent editing on the manuscript of the Boxing for Self-Defense book. So that kind of stuff I pretty much have no real control over. So that's the healing process that is going to have to do its work, and we'll see how it goes. I'm pretty much at home working as much as I can, but there's some moments where some of the painkillers are pretty strong. So and if you've gone through this kind of surgery, you know what it's like. Anyway, enough about that. A final update that I wanted to give is something else. As you guys know, Paladin Press, one of my publishers, is basically, they stopped, were setting up shop. So they closed the company down. And my heavy bag book and all my DVDs are no longer for sale. So that means that and I announced this many times in the past few months. So if you only hear about this now, I'm sorry you didn't hear before, but I did my best to let everybody know. But the main thing is that those videos are now no longer available via DVD. Now, I've looked at many different options of how I could republish them, because the rights to those videos revert back to me on January 1st, 2018. So that's in about 2 weeks. I looked into how I could republish the videos as DVD discs themselves, but didn't really find a workable solution. And that's for many different reasons, just many technical aspects. But also one of the main problems is that I'm not a US citizen. I live in Europe, so if I wanted it to be available on Amazon, which is always one of my goals, if I publish a DVD, it was becoming very difficult to set that up, and there needed to be middlemen involved, and lots of extra red tape for me as well. And I'm not a guy selling DVDs. That's not me. I prefer to make the product and then set it up so that there are retailers doing all the sales. But I'm not going to start shipping and warehousing DVDs here in Belgium. That's just not going to happen. For many reasons that have to do with the way that Belgium works, or rather doesn't work. So I'm not going to go into that. However, I did find a solution to that problem, and that's why I also uploaded that first new instructional video, the 5-element arm one, because it uses a platform which is called Pivot Share. And I have to thank one of my patrons, Mark, for that. So thanks again, Mark, for pointing that out to me. Pivot Share is basically an online sharing platform for videos. You can put videos online there for either a streaming version or a download, and you can also do membership sites there. And a bunch of people are already on there offering a lot of good content. I actually saw it before, but I didn't realize it until Mark pointed it out to me again. But Bas Rutten, or I have to say Bas Rutten, for the people who speak Dutch, who the MMA fighter, he has a bunch of his old fights and instructional videos on there. And I think it's quite a good platform. It works well, and putting that 5-element arm video on there allowed me to see how everything works in the background and how you can set up everything there. And I think it's quite a decent platform. So what I will do is put all my Paladin Press DVDs on there. So it's going to be an online video library that I'll offer first. You can buy the video, and I might eventually get to the point where I also do some sort of membership site where you have a monthly fee and I keep on adding videos. Not quite sure yet. Again, I'm focusing mainly now on getting the DVDs on there, and then also obviously on my rehab and recovery from my surgery. So in the long run, I think I'll do more with that, but that's going to be a couple months out of in the future. So that's another thing that I wanted to mention, because I just got another request via Facebook looking for my DVDs, and I had to say pretty much what I've been saying for several weeks now. I'm sorry, but I can't help you. They're not for sale anymore. I can't sell them because Paladin Press is gone, which is a crying shame, but it is what it is. They're not for sale, and I've actually noticed that when you go on I think it was on Amazon that I saw some of my DVDs for sale at a crazy expensive price, because apparently people are already realizing that you can't find those DVDs anymore. Which brings me to another point. One of the disagreements I did have with Paladin Press was on pricing. I thought that my DVDs were overpriced. I understood why they priced them as they did, but I disagree with that. But this is the thing: when you sign as an author with a publisher, you don't necessarily have control over the pricing, and now that comes back to me now that the rights will revert to me. So that's something that I'll do. My DVDs will not be at the same price level as they were. I'm going to make it cheaper, because I think it has to be a reasonable price, a price that everybody can live with, that I can be happy with, that I can give you a good product, and that you don't have the feeling that you're getting ripped off by getting charged a crazy amount for getting a video. So that's one thing that I also wanted to mention, is that I'll make sure that the pricing is in what I consider reasonable. Now, this is obviously a difficult topic in and of itself, because many people nowadays view video as well, basically you don't have to pay for it, and that's the rise of YouTube and online videos and so on. pretty much has changed the market a little bit. I think I view it differently. In my opinion, it's more about the one doesn't get in the way of the other. So as you know, my YouTube channel has a bunch of videos on there as well, and they're free. You can get them for free. Then I've got another level on my Patreon page, depending on which level of reward that you choose. You also get access to private videos, and they are at varying price ranges. And then you've got my DVDs now from Paladin Press that I will be offering online again very soon. And they will be standalone products that you can buy and own then. And you pick whichever one you like. So I think with all these three levels, so free on YouTube, then different levels of videos on Patreon, and then the separate DVD products, I think there's not much more that I can do to offer my all the content that I do on video, and offer it at the most diverse possible, in the most diverse possible ways, so that everybody has a way to get it that is fair to both you as the buyer or the viewer, and me as a creator. So and that's basically what I want. I just want to make sure that everybody can find a way to see the videos that is correct for everybody, for you guys, for me, and for everybody. So that is what I will be doing next. So focusing on the boxing book, but also preparing already for putting all my DVDs online. It's going to be quite a lot of work to get that done correctly, and it has to do again with technical stuff. If you want to stay notified, as always, you can go to the show notes, and I'll put a link in there, so you can join my notification email list. And there's no spam there. It's just whenever I have a new product out, or I do a discount on something, you get a short email just describing what's going on, and it's up to you to ignore it or jump on that occasion. So if you want to stay notified, again, go to the show notes, and I'll put the link in there where you can join my notification list. So that is pretty much the main topics that I wanted to discuss. And then we get to the Q&A part. I got a question via Facebook message, and it's from David, and he said, "I'm new to your blog, and I found it through an article about mixed martial arts. You were very critical about it for self-defense. But I also saw on your Facebook page that you teach MMA. How come?" That's an excellent question, David. One of the things that I believe that I've been very much misunderstood about is my position on combat sports for self-defense, and in particular mixed martial arts. I have nothing against combat sports. Quite on the contrary. I competed in Sanshou, which is Chinese kickboxing, which is which is in many ways similar to MMA, in that there's clinching, throwing, punching, kicking, and so on. No groundwork, but also the environmental factor is that you were on a stage, so a ring without ropes, and if you got too close to the edge and got kicked off or fell off twice, you lost a round. So the environments played a big factor, which is like in the cage in MMA, where you have to take into account that somebody can push you into a wall. So you have to watch your environment as well. So I have nothing against combat sports, quite on the contrary. I've been training in them for decades, and I continue to do so. I teach an MMA class. I used to teach Sanshou. A few years ago, I switched to MMA for a variety of reasons that I'm not going to go into now again, because I've done so at length in the past. Here's a point. I started training when I was 13, so I am almost 46 now. So I've been around the block a little bit when it comes to martial arts and combat sports. Now, when I was starting, the big thing was kickboxing and Muay Thai. That was the new combat sport, and everybody was going on about, well, you know, those guys, they suck, and it's not really. You saw a leg kick being done by a Muay Thai guy, and it didn't look as fancy as a nice Mawashigiri that a karateka did, and they were like, no, they don't have technique. And then, you know, traditional martial artists would fight these Muay Thai guys, and they'd get beat up. And it wasn't really about them being superior, but they had a really rough training method, and they would spar and fight for real. They wouldn't pull punches like you would see mostly being done in competitive format back then in karate tournaments. So it was just mostly the training method. And that was the big thing then. And a little bit later, then MMA started coming up, and then that was the new standard. But before that, I remember all the different styles that came up. In the 80s, it was ninjutsu. All of a sudden, the ninja craze came over from Hollywood, and everybody was doing that, and everybody was saying like, okay, this is the ultimate martial art. And when you trace it back throughout time, you'll see that this happens over and over again. Back in the West, we had boxing and wrestling as martial arts that were very popular. Then, if I'm not mistaken, in the 50s or in the 60s in Belgium, judo and jiu-jitsu came along. All of a sudden, people started seeing that as more effective. And then we had karate coming along, and then that was the new thing. And then we had Chinese martial arts, and because everybody wanted to be Bruce Lee, and then that was supposedly the best martial art for self-defense. And it just keeps on going. I think we're at a stage now where hopefully most people understand that it is not about which art you practice, but it's about you, first of all, as a practitioner. And second of all, it's also about why are you training and which art are you using for that training. It's not for me as much that you cannot use mixed martial art for self-defense. But the main question remains, why would you? And then we get to a bunch of reasons. It could be because that's the only thing that's available for you. There's no class anywhere near you where you have people that you can train with. And it's only the MMA class. And you go there and then you try to make it work for self-defense as well, which is perfectly valid. Just so you know, that's what the Boxing for Self-Defense book is all about. Is if you only have boxing training available to you, well, how can you adapt the ring techniques to defend yourself in the street? And I've written an article about that that was published in Black Belt magazine a few years ago, and that was about going from the octagon to the street. What are the differences from a combat sport to a self-defense situation? And in that, I mentioned several different factors that you have to take into account in your training. And I think that's where the disconnect follows, is that people think that because of the articles that I wrote, that I have something against MMA or combat sports in general, but I don't. Quite on the contrary. If I were a younger man, I would be competing in MMA right now. But I'm a little bit too old for that, so that's not going to happen. But I think the sport is awesome. It's great. Absolutely nothing against it. The main thing I see is, like I said, remember that little history lesson? I've seen this happen time and time again when a new art or combat sport comes along and people jump on it and they're like, okay, this is the next best thing to sliced bread, and that's it. We found the new holy grail of self-defense. I disagree with that. I think that's not really a good way to approach it. And on the other hand, there's also the specificity of each art. If you train for mixed martial arts, you're training for a sporting contest, a dueling contest. There's you, there's the other guy, there's a referee, there's a cage, and you do have rules. And if you look at the UFC nowadays, there's quite a lot of rules. And you train to react in a split second within those rules and within that environment. And it works great in a cage, everything that MMA fighters do. However, not everything is exactly the same when you're in a self-defense situation. Not that long ago, I'm blanking out on his name, but I want to say Guy Metzger, but I might be wrong. But there was an MMA fighter who got involved in this altercation between a couple that was arguing, and he got involved, and he basically punched the guy, if I'm not mistaken, and the guy came back and hit him. And it was afterwards, the MMA fighter, and we're talking a guy, a UFC professional, that he realized that he was slashed and that his hand was basically, the knife had injured him pretty badly. And he was lucky to still have the function of his hand afterwards. And he said, I didn't even see the knife. I didn't even know. And we're not talking about a guy who doesn't know how to fight with MMA techniques, quite on the contrary. And that is always my point, is are you using the right tool for the right job? So if you want to train for some sort of combat sport, whether it's MMA, Muay Thai, or whatever, I do not think that using traditional Kung Fu or karate techniques is going to get you there in the best possible way. I don't think they are meant for that. They're not created for that environment. But and there are better alternatives. Can you adapt them? Sure, you can. But why would you do that if you have an already established system of techniques that work really well in that environment? And those techniques are always evolving, as in any sport. Watch a tennis match from 30 years ago, the best men's players that were playing back then, and then watch what's happening today, and you'll see differences, many differences. Sports evolve. But the same thing also applies vice versa. And that is, if you take a system of martial arts that is specifically designed to work in the best possible way in a sporting environment, can you adapt that to self-defense in the street? Sure, you can. But why would you do that if you already have systems that are specifically focused on that aspect? And so for me, it works in both ways. And that is why I don't see any disconnect or any contradiction in practicing and teaching MMA like I do, traditional Tai Chi Chuan styles and other Kung Fu styles, and basic self-defense systems that I teach as well. I don't see it as either or. I see them as different tools that you can use in different situations. And there is a large amount of overlap, but there are also many differences. And as I always say, the differences are just as important as the similarities, which is Randy's rule. And so Randy is a guy I heard this from, and I think it's a very impactful way of looking at your training, is look at the differences and see that they are just as important, whereas many people only focus on the similarities. It's up to you. That's the main thing. You have to do what works for you. Let me put it this way. I don't see anybody arguing when it's about carpenting, like, dude, this is the best hammer possible, and all those screwdrivers suck, and you can't do anything with them. You need this hammer. This hammer will do every job you need to be done. You need to get done. No. A carpenter just has his toolbox, and he's going to grab a screwdriver, hammer, a saw, whatever he needs to get the specific job done. And I see that in a very similar way when it comes to self-defense and combat sports. Just focus on what your goal is, what are you training for, and then pick whatever tool you need to get the job done. And if for you that means MMA, then that's fine. I have no issue with that. Then my only advice would be, what I've been saying for years now, is that, okay, so you want to take a combat sport, something that works really well in a dueling context and as a sporting event. You want to take something that works well there and take it outside of that context to use it for self-defense, perfectly fine. Then I would suggest you focus on how are those two contexts different from each other, and how do you have to adapt your MMA techniques. That's it. That's my point. So, David, I hope that answers your question. I think it was a great question. I haven't had that for a long time. Somebody asked me about that because I've written those articles many years ago. I think it's a very valid question, and I hope I answered it correctly. So that brings this episode to a close. So I want to thank everybody again for your listening, and as always, all the links of the stuff that I mentioned will be in the show notes. So you can click on the links there if something interests you. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so via Patreon. I offer a bunch of stuff there at starting from $1 a month. So I'm sure there's something there that you might like. And also, obviously, you can share, like, subscribe, and join me on social media, whatever you like. It's all good. So thanks again, and I will talk to you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to the Demeere podcast. For more information, go to www.wilmsblog.com.